All right, kia ora everybody, welcome back. We will now recommence where we left off. So those that want to speak to this motion here, if you could please raise your hands. I'll go to you first, Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will support this, but I will also say a little bit on the negative side. We are giving the CEO the right to make these decisions. And if she decides to come back with one of our sacred cows and cuts them, we have to accept it. Be warned of that. If one of your sacred cows is affected, you're going to have to accept what's happened, but I will support it as we do it.
The Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support the tenor of what is proposed. I mean, we had an annual budget that was developed pre-COVID. We went out, we received submissions during the heat of COVID, and of those 49 submissions, we understand that a majority were seeking some change. I think often when council goes out for opportunities like this, we do need to have real and significant cognizance of the submissions that people have made and have gone through the effort and energy to speak to them. I know that there are other councils around the country and nearby who are seeking a rates freeze. I don't think that's the option that this council wants to pursue. It's not something that we want to move into in the sense of being a stagnant city for those that live here and those that visit. But likewise, I don't think we can simply proceed full steam ahead with the current context and current circumstances. What Councillor Beattie is suggesting, I think, is a pragmatic, a sensible and a compassionate way forward for the city and for the community. I think there has been some comment this morning around the timing of this. And I do want to just very briefly comment on that, because this is the first formal opportunity that elected members have had to address this issue. On the 11th of May, we completed hearing from our community around submissions. It is open to any elected member to propose whatever they wish today. So suggestions that, and I accept that staff have been working really hard around this, but criticism towards, I think, an elected member because they wish to pursue something on the very first formal opportunity to do that in the correct decision-making process doesn't necessarily sit too comfortably with me. What I am suggesting, though, is I do wish to move an amendment that hopefully will be on the screen. And what it does provide is, I think, a little bit more clarity, because as it stands with Councillor Beattie's substantive motion, there is no reference to Appendix 4, rather it replaces Appendix 4. And so where there have been comments made around a lot of these decisions, line by line, being political in nature, and that we shouldn't be effectively delegating that to the CE, what this amendment does is it confirms what is contained in Appendix 4, that falls within that 1.4 envelope or reduction. So the additional figure then would be an additional 550,000 that we would be asking the CE to have a look at. And just following on from what Councillor Finlay had touched on, that, you know, often there are particular pet projects that elected members have. The staff have done a fantastic job looking across all of Council's activities in developing the spreadsheets and the proposals that are in front of us today. And I have every faith and every hope that the CE and her team will look again at all of council activities in an equitable and fair way, so that it's not simply about targeting particular things, but taking another look to deliver on that operational expenditure envelope that we are going to set. So I would ask elected members to support the amendment. So in essence, it at a political level does give certainty around the status of Appendix 4, but also gives a direction to the CE to come back to us on the 10th of June with those additional savings.
Happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. So moved by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Naylor. I now, in the speaking order there, Councillor Rutherford.
So, Mr Mayor, have we moved now to the amendment?
Yes, we have.
Okay. The comments I will make to the amendment will also apply to the substantive motion in the interest of saving a bit of time.
Thank you.
I will not support this. I will not support the original motion either. I don't support reducing the level of service that we provide at this time any further than what has already been proposed by the CE through some cost saving that's in front of us. My biggest concerns are around some reputation repercussions, going against the expectations that our community hold for this organisation. And I just don't think that constantly scrimping away at our budgets is in the best interest of either this organisation or our community. We still need to get some things done and we still need to operate and function. So I think that what's already been proposed to us is fair. There are aspects of it that I don't agree with, but as a general rule, I'm not interested in us continually clawing away at the budget until there's nothing left. If we look at those people who did comment on reducing the rates or to whatever degree through our submissions, assuming that we have around 90,000 people in our city, we heard from 0.04%. That is not enough of a voice for us to make a decision on. The example that Councillor Butt gave around, do we listen to the one person who hasn't had customers for a couple of hours, or do we listen to the one person who made a comment around a zero rate increase? Who are we listening to? And I do not think that 0.04% is enough of a voice for us to decide to slash everything at the knees. I'm still interested in this council fulfilling its vision that we've set and fulfilling its goals. And that means that we actually need to ensure that the council keeps spending, that projects keep happening, that we keep moving forward. We have already come down from 4.4%, and I'm very comfortable with starting this conversation at 2.5%, remembering that the only conversations we have had today so far have been about cutting, and there's still going to be items that we have either missed that we want to restore or that we want to include in the annual budget. So we haven't got to that. So I absolutely won't support either the amendment or the substantive motion.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And while I do have sympathy for the direction that the Deputy Mayor set with this proposed amendment, it strikes me that we're still taking what's already a big question mark over Appendix 4 and just turning it into an even bigger question mark without actually looking at Appendix 4, doing the work there and getting to the end and deciding if then there might still be some further work to do. And so I find this, while in some ways attractive, to also be preemptive, and my strong preference would be that we do actually work through what the Chief Executive and her team have put an incredible amount of work into to bring us today. And at the end of that, if we still feel there's further work, we could do that. My general view on rates and where we need to sit is that we're probably actually reasonably close, because I do have concerns around our ability to actually respond to community need. So we are in a double bind, because at the same time that we have resource constraints coming on council, we have a community that actually needs council. And if we start cutting and we get closer and closer and closer to the bone, we run the real risk of not actually meeting our community's needs in the year ahead. And I don't want us to be in that position for the want of a couple scraps on the table today. So I won't be supporting the proposal that's put to us at this stage.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be supporting the proposal or the amendment, although the amendment does address some of my concerns about the proposal in general. So I understand the thinking of elected members to have a genuine concern about people who will be struggling to pay their rates, both residential and commercial. What I think we should be doing, instead of some kind of universal benefit where everybody gets a rates cut, is a much more targeted approach to people who need the help. And I would support having help for business or individual ratepayers that have had a big reduction in income because of COVID-19, being able to apply for help with their rates. But what I would not support is a big cut across the board so that everybody gets a slightly smaller rates bill. The consequence of that is that lots of people who are still in work will get an extra $1 in their pocket once a week, because that's the level we're talking about. I don't think that that's targeted to those who really need the help. It's not enough help for those who are struggling, and for those who are not struggling, it's not a significant advantage to them. So although I understand the sentiment of wanting to assist those struggling, I think we could do that much more effectively with a targeted help than an across-the-board cut. Secondly, addressing the submissions, there were indeed submissions that requested us not to cut too deeply. And one of those that I took particular note of was from the Chamber of Commerce. Now, the Chamber of Commerce represents business interests in the city, lots of small and medium enterprises, and they particularly asked us not to cut too deeply. So if we're going to be looking and thinking about submissions, which is part of today's process, that's a submission that I think we would do well to keep in mind. Now, I personally need certainty about where the cuts are going to fall. I'm not prepared to vote for any kind of across-the-board cut that doesn't specify exactly where that cut will be. And that's because after we've been through this process, we need to go out and own this to the public, to the residents, to the businesses, and we need to take responsibility for where cuts have fallen. And simply deferring it over to the CE to come up with a list for the next meeting to tick off isn't really what I think our role is in this process. We're all elected representatives. We represent people in the city. We're trying to do our best for the city. We need to step up and take that leadership and responsibility today, not be passing it on. I do think that there's a little bit of a sort of a bait and switch move here, where we've had a very severe cut voted down, and now it makes this one seem more moderate. But in actual fact, when I came into this meeting, Councillor Beattie had at least given us the courtesy of a heads up about her motion, for which I'm grateful. I wasn't feeling comfortable with the degree of cut that was proposed at that point. So just because we've rejected a more severe cut doesn't mean that this one suddenly becomes more moderate. We're already looking at cuts from 4.4% proposed down to 2.5%. And I think that that's sufficient. It does address those people who've asked us to moderate the rates increase. It addresses it quite substantially if you look at what was proposed in the long-term plan, which from memory was about 5.6%. So I feel that we have listened. We should go out on with a 2.5%. And I really do not want to see us go down to 1.9 or 1.95% with an extra $550,000 worth of cuts that at the moment we can't say where the axe will fall.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got you listed, Councillor Harpiter, but just I'll just chime in here. Look, councillors, I will support this. It is about balance. I do think we're already doing the targeted stuff. I'm taking calls just about every day and referring them to the CFO. And there is rates relief available for those already, and that is being taken up. Look, it's about balance. Completely shutting the door on the public on their rates increase concerns, I think, is somewhat unwise. And believe me, it's much more than just 49 submissions. I would say it'd be in the thousands. Certainly, that's what I'm hearing as the mayor. But look, it's a balance. It is balance as well, and it's a prudent budget in terms of the cut that we're asking for. It still gives the resource. It still gives the officers an opportunity to keep the city moving, to gear up when necessary. We're talking 550,000, and we've heard that it is possible. Yes, we're unsure where those cuts will fall, but in a budget of 550,000 is what we're talking about. If this doesn't succeed, I don't like the horse trading that'll go on after this. And I've been around this table long enough to know that some unforeseen consequences happen when that horse trading goes through. So please do the right thing, councillors. Vote for this. It gives us a fair and balanced way forward. Councillor Harpenden.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one question first before I make a comment, if that's all right. My question is, in addition to Appendix 4, does that assume that all items proceed as they've been outlined in Appendix 4, and does that preclude any change to any of those items?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes.
Thank you. I'm happy to make a comment on the amendment and the substantive motion just in the for the sake of time also. I appreciate the comments that the Deputy Mayor has made in terms of process, and I agree with that. I think it's really important to recognise that as elected members, we all come to a position in different ways, and you know, for me, I didn't really come to a certain position about what my level of comfort would be in terms of a rates rise until about 4 o'clock this morning, when I really should have been asleep. I think, you know, for me, it's important to gather as much information as possible. And I think the COVID situation has really put a different slant on this debate, where we are forced to have to acknowledge and consider some very real impact to people in our community, and trying to figure out what would be an appropriate level that would be compassionate but would be responsible was quite a big debate in my own mind. And I think the decision-making process that we have here, I respect, and whilst discussions that we've had informally have been really useful, I think this is where we actually hear from everyone where their position is and have that debate, and I think and hopefully come to a good outcome. I will be supporting the amendment and the substantive motion. I appreciate the comments that elected members have made about our role to determine the detail. However, and if this fails, I'll certainly be willing to engage in that process to try and achieve a similar result. But my view is that realistically, we're going to be able to achieve a better rates increase through this motion. Stuart said earlier that it puts a lot of it puts trust in the CE, and I acknowledge that it does put a lot of trust in the CE, but that's just not, you know, we do have to trust our CE. We've employed her to do a job, and it's not just without some parameters. So we've got a clear vision and clear strategies that will define the direction that we want to go, and also a lot of feedback, obviously, that she's heard over informal discussions and through the discussions that will be had going forward. So I'm happy to support this. As I said before, you know, there will be some natural reduction of some of council's activity through level 2 and through this process. And so I think there will be ways of achieving this without perhaps some of the dramatic examples that people have suggested around service cuts. And I don't see this as, you know, clawing back. This still provides over $3.5 million more than what our current budget is this year, and $3.5 million more than what was outlined in our original LTP. So I think this is still provides a substantial budget for us to deliver effectively on our vision and goals.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to colleagues for all of your considered comments and the different perspectives that brings to the table. First, from my driver in this is to try to use council's substantial resource pool to do as much good for as many people as possible. And my concern here is that the small percentage savings that we're talking about deliver across the board savings which don't do as much good for the people who need it as we possibly could do, whether that is commercial operators or individuals who are struggling. And we all know people who've lost their jobs. Absolutely. There are some people who are doing this really hard out there. We all know businesses where turnover has disappeared, completely tanked, still isn't looking like it's picking up. But equally, in our community, we all know people who still have the jobs that they had at the start, whose expenses have actually gone down, who are financially better off because of the situation that we find ourselves in. So to deliver across the board reduction in rates increases, which as Councillor Nelly rightly points out is still more money, doesn't actually help the people who need it the most in a way that is most useful. I think council can do better to help the people who need it most. That's a challenge. And it's encouraging to hear, that through the Mayor's office that we're being able to respond to individual sets of circumstances appropriately. And I think that is the right way to go. I support the position that Councillor Barrett outlined, actually, that we need to go through Appendix 4, decide where we're happy with the cuts to line, and then see where we're at. And it might be at that point that we have to look at a number that we ask the CE to go away and find some additional savings and come back. But without going through Appendix 4 line by line, and many of you know I have some concerns about some of the elements of Appendix 4, I'm not prepared to support this. I'm not prepared to just tick off that appendix as a block and say I'm happy with that, because I'm not. So I support this direction of travel if we want to have that conversation about where we're happy to land. But for me, this isn't just about bringing in a headline of we got this under 2%. For me, this is about getting real support to the people in our community who need it the most. And that's why I won't support the substantive or the amendment in front of us. Thank you.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the Deputy Mayor's amendment is a good compromise, and I'm happy to support it, because at the end of the day, my argument is around the balance. And I think this will bring in the balance, and we've still got time by the Chief Executive will still be able to have a look at Appendix 4, because some of the things in all of those appendixes will have changed between now and June the 10th. My main concern is setting the direction of having those rates sitting at a balanced level. And I won't go into a lot of comment, you've already heard what I've said. But one of the comments that I will make, last year we only got 97 submissions in the annual plan. Yet we made a lot of monetary decisions around those submissions. An example was the free swimming. I think off the top of my head, I think we only had 27 submissions on free swimming, but we ticked off $160,000. So I'll just let you have a think about that. But when you have 44 people who don't normally, out of last year's 97, that's quite a bigger statistic. So, and when you start getting out in the community, like all of us have, that brings those figures to roost. And I mean, it's a lot of what I've heard is around that community. And I haven't heard many, in fact, I haven't heard one business tell me yet that they're better off before COVID-19. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillors, is there anybody else that wants to speak before I give the right of reply back to the Deputy Mayor? Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just really want to, I guess, reiterate the points I made earlier on. And firstly, it's, yeah, I think the councillors, the council officers have already taken a very heavy hand to the budget as it stands at 2.5%. And because we, as a council, need to still operate and provide a level of service in our community. And I'll just pick up on Councillor Bowen's point. Is that the council still needs to have the capacity to respond to the needs of the community. There may be an appetite, I guess, to go through Appendix 4 line by line, and if that's necessary, I'm quite happy to do that. There may be further opportunities as things progress towards the 10th of June. Where other savings will become apparent. And I just want everybody to remember that all cuts will have a consequence. So I think we need to trust the work that our council officers have done and head in that direction. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else wish to speak before I hand it back? Okay. I'll now pass back to you, Deputy Mayor, if you don't. No right of reply? Okay. Oh, Councillor Dingwell, did you want to speak?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay. All right. So we have the amendment to the motion that the Chief Executive be instructed to make a $550,000 reduction to the OPEX budget in addition to Appendix 4 of Council's activities. Chief Executive is to report such proposed OPEX reductions to Committee of Council meeting on the 10th of June 2020. This will reduce the rate rise to 1.95%. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Naylor.
Can I call for a division, please, Mr. Mayor?
I knew that was coming, so we're going to do that by division. So I'll now hand to...
sorry, just for clarification, are we just voting on the amendment or are we voting on the whole thing?
We're just voting on the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
So over to you.
Mayor Smith?
4.
4. Deputy Mayor Tukere? 4. Councillor Hapeta?
4.
4. Councillor Rutherford?
Against.
Against. Councillor Johnson?
Against.
Against. Councillor Finlay? 4. Councillor Hancock?
Against.
Against. Councillor Butt?
Against.
Against. Councillor Dennison?
Against.
Against. Councillor Bowen? Against. Councillor Barrett? Against. Councillor Beattie? 4. Councillor Naylor? 4. 4. Councillor Dingwall?
4.
4. Councillor Petrinas? 4. Councillor Meehan? 4.
The amendment is passed, 9 votes for and 7 against. So, councillors, we now come back to the substantive motion. So councillors, we have to do the substantive motion because it's already been discussed. So, well, yes. So Councillor Beattie had moved this and I had seconded it.
Can we call for a division, please?
Yeah, and we'll do the division again. Okay, so if we could do the division, thank you.
Councillor Harpeter.
4.
4. Councillor Dennison.
Against.
Against. Deputy Mayor Utikere. 4. Councillor Petrinas. 4. Councillor Rutherford.
Against.
Against. Councillor Barrett. Against. Councillor Bowen. Against. Councillor Beattie. 4. Councillor Butt.
Against.
Against. Councillor Finlay. 4. Councillor Hancock.
Against.
Against. Councillor Dingwall.
4.
4. Councillor Johnson.
Against.
Against. Councillor Meehan. 4. Mayor Smith.
4.
4. Councillor Naylor. 4. 4.
And the substantive motion has passed 9-4 and 7 against. So, councillors, we go back to the rest of number 2. And that is that the Chief Executive be instructed to prepare a draft of the final annual report document for consideration by the Committee of Council at its meeting on the 10th of June, and then incorporate proposed budget changes entitled Annual Report 2020/21, Schedule of Proposed Budget Changes, attached as Appendix 1, and then B, the proposed program carry forwards entitled Annual Budget 2020/21, Schedule of Proposed Carry Forward Capital Programs, attached as Appendix 2. C, the proposed amendments to the Capital Expenditure Program entitled Annual Budget 2020/21, Schedule of Proposed Amendments to Capital Expenditure Programs, attached as Appendix 3. Can we move down, please? D is out, being replaced. Put a line through that, please. And then E is establishment of an operating program of 200,000 to provide a support for community relief efforts post-COVID-19, with the support to be subject to criteria yet to be developed and approved by Council. And then F, any amendments determined by the committee. And we've got another one added here from Councillor Rutherford, that a new budget of 80,000 be allocated to enable participation in the council chamber. So Councillor Rutherford, do you have a seconder for that? Yeah, Councillor Harpeter. Okay. So we've got those A to what is effectively F. I'll look to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, and we will look to, does anybody wish to comment on those? Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, is Councillor Rutherford's amendment included? We're taking that separately.
We'll take that separately.
So I just wanted to speak to E, because as the Deputy Mayor has said, any discussions that were made informally in which people offered agreement for the provision of an operating programme of 200,000 to provide support for community relief efforts shouldn't be taken as granted, because it may well have been that in the very numerous meetings and workshops that we had over the last few weeks, that those who expressed support for this budget didn't really support it and were perhaps intending to change their position in the chamber. So just in case, I will speak in favour of it, because you just never know these days what might come out of left field. So in terms of this programme, the idea of this is to support community organisations rather than individuals who might have either a reduction in their funding because of a difficult funding environment due to the COVID-19 environment, particularly, for example, we know that pub charities and those types of funds will be lower, but also interest rates are lower, and trust funds will have less money to distribute. Plus, we also know that there will be an increased social demand on community organisations providing social services. And so the aim is that this programme would be set up to provide a hand up to community organisations who would be otherwise struggling to fulfil their social service requirement. So although I acknowledge that everybody appeared to be in favour of this previously, I do hope I can still count on your support now that we're meeting in public. Thank you.
Councillor Barn.
Thank you. Just to follow up on E, it's been a problem that we faced in this chamber in how we scope our funds and in how that's interpreted in the council, that when we say that something is, as we say here, for community groups, that runs the risk of being given quite a narrow interpretation. It's something particularly Councillor Johnson and I have had to address through previous annual budgets to specify that by community groups, we actually mean that full range of our social sector, sports, arts, social and environmental groups. And it would certainly be my expectation that all of those not-for-profit groups that operate in a way that supports our community should find a route to be able to make an application to this fund, obviously noting that the criteria is yet to be developed. But I would signal here that my expectation that community as a definition is drawn as widely as possible.
Councillors, anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Naylor?
I do have a question, but are we covering all of the appendices or just one at a time?
No, we're doing them 2A, B, C and E.
Okay, I have a couple of questions to ask and then just a comment. The first question relates to just wanting some clarification to an item that's in Appendix 1, and that's the 700,000 parking revenue reduced, that assumption. And I know there's been some discussion around...
Point of order, Mr Mayor, haven't we already done the questions?
Yeah, I was just about to say we've already voted on that, Councillor.
Voted on this is A. We haven't voted on Appendix 1, have we?
Well, we have effectively bypassing the last motion.
The last motion, I asked for clarification if that included Appendix 4, which is D, I think, and that was.
Well, you can ask your question anyway.
I thought that recommendation A was one that we were yet to do. So the question around the $700,000 parking revenue reduced assumption, obviously there's a cost of about 0.7% of rates in that reduction due to the loss of revenue. And originally I understood that there was an estimate provided from officers that was between 300 and 700,000. And there was some discussion around the fact that that was a bit of a guessing game and that we don't really know how much that will be, and that if it happened to end up being less, then we could use the rest of that money for other initiatives. And I guess I was a little bit uneasy about that, and because I think we don't want to just create a slush fund without having some determination around what it might be used for. So I'm just wanting to have some clarification about what would happen if that assumption is a lot less than that.
Oh, I'm happy to answer that. Yeah. So it is an assumption, and we had to put a stake in the ground somewhere. And early on we were unsure, and then we've asked opinions from the roading team and from Robert Van Bentham and the like to come up with the $700,000. And I guess I've been keeping my eyes open for several weeks now since that number was mentioned to see whether there's any reason to change that assumption, because it is an assumption. Nobody knows. We haven't been through this crisis before. We don't know. I guess all I would say in terms of the number is if you wander around the square now, we're not charging for parking at all. I assumed we would be inundated with a massive rush of people using the parks, and yesterday walking around at lunchtime, maybe they were 2/3 full of that, and one would assume some of them are office workers. So I stand by that assumption. I think the demand for parking is going to be significantly lower than we expected. The 2021 budget had an increase in parking fees and charges, and I just, I stand by the assumption that 700 is a good number to go with. There's a risk on both sides. If it's under 700 and we end up earning more revenue than we anticipated, there is potentially some money available that could be used for other reasons. If it's over, then the opposite's true. We're going to have to borrow to fund the shortfall because we haven't estimated enough of a reduction. And so it is a risk, it is an assumption, that's probably the best we can do.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I'm happy with that on that basis. But just want to make a comment about the E, which is the operating, the Community Relief Fund of 200,000. Now, I am uneasy about I realise that is subject to criteria yet to be developed, but my sense is once we approve an amount, it's kind of a done deal and the criteria just comes through. I guess my question is, if we're not comfortable, I guess the full assessment of what will be provided by the government through MSD and other government departments, do we have a clear assessment of that and whether there will actually be some gaps to what's being provided?
I can wholeheartedly tell you there will be gaps. I'm right at the coalface of what is going on, and there will be people that will fall and organisations that will fall. And look, this is, as Councillor Johnson said, this is hand up stuff. This is not, it's really just to enable people to survive. It really is. Yes, MSD, work and income, health and others have provided some pots, and but they are getting withdrawn. And I think the officers know with the welfare that there is a transition out, and that's just in welfare. I'm talking more about community organisations that add real value to us. They might be Citizens Advice, the Volunteer Resource Centre. They are doing a lot of work in the background for the city and for our community. They will probably be damaged in some way. I'm absolutely sure of it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rutherford.
Mr Mayor, I just wanted to speak to the additional recommendation I've put up, but I see that that's not in the first round of the voting. Do you want me to hold off until then or speak now?
Just hold off to that one. We'll get through this. Is there any others that would like to speak to what we've got up there? Councillor Harpiter.
I just want to speak in support of the E. I wholeheartedly support that, Councillor Johnson, so don't have any doubts about that. It's a great initiative for our community, widely spread across all facets of our community in terms of all things that Councillor Bowen said. So well done.
And I could just add to that we have had an offer from the Te Awa Community Foundation to be involved as well. They're an independent community foundation. Some of you were at the launch here late last year, so they will talk to officers and what they can assist with. It might be helping with the admin of it or something, but they might even put something in. But the offer has been made to the Mayor's office, so we'll see where that goes. Okay, is there anything else? I'll go back. Oh, it's back to me, sorry. I'll come back to me. So, councillors, we have 2A. I'm not going to read them all out again. 2A, B, C, and E. There are no further. Okay. Do we want to do this by division?
Yes, please. Okay, voting on 2A, B, C, and E. Councillor Harpiter?
4.
4. Councillor Finlay? 4. Councillor Naylor? 4.
4. Councillor Hancock.
4.
4. Councillor Beattie. 4. Councillor Dennison.
4.
4. Mayor Smith.
4.
4. Deputy Mayor Tukere. 4. Councillor Bowen.
4.
4. Councillor Meehan. 4. Councillor Butt.
4.
Councillor Barrett.
4.
4. Councillor Johnson. 4. 4. Councillor Rutherford. 4. 4. Councillor Dingwall.
4.
4. Councillor Petrinas. 4.
Just making sure it's official because I got it wrong once. 16, that's passed 16, 4, none against. Right. We will now go to Councillor Rutherford's additional. Okay, I'll allow you to speak to it, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the additional recommendation is that a new budget of $80,000 be approved to enable participation in the council chamber. And so this is about the ability to choose to participate remotely as a community member, a staff member, a consultant, an elected member moving forward. And much like we are meeting today and we have been meeting through COVID, it gives the opportunity for us to continue that. So $80,000 has come from the transformation team who have done the legwork on this one for me. And that includes cameras, streaming hardware and pro streaming service. The idea is, as we heard through the digital transformation workshop, that we think big, start small, move fast, test and improve. Moving fast is probably the aspect that I'm particularly keen on us responding to at this time. COVID has shown us that this kind of participation, both in person and digitally, does work and can be very effective when it's done well. Participation with council moving forward is going to look quite different to many people, and we don't want to be excluding people because our technology is not up to scratch for 2020. Through the IM report that is being done with Quorum, they are looking at more longer term solutions, but even with that report and with recommendations, we're going to need to consider some big investment in technology through the long-term plan. What this is proposing is actually putting a solution in place immediately, something that could be up and running in the next month or two, to provide participation moving forward. The $80,000 is a one-off cost, and my understanding is that the subscription service, which is around $5,000 a year, would be the only ongoing cost. So this is about thinking big, starting small, doing something now, and I'm happy to answer questions if I can, but it is a small piece of the budget that will require some bigger investment in future years, but this is going to allow digital participation for both our community, consultants, staff members and others moving forward.
Councillor Harpiter, you seconder.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Rutherford, for bringing it forward. I just think it's time for this council to be up with every other council that is doing it, and we're not there and we haven't been there for ever. So I think that it is time for us to be putting our money where our mouth should be. So 80,000, I know it hasn't been in this budget, but it is time for us to do it. So well done for Councillor Rutherford for putting it up. And I think we should be brave and bold and do it. And I think this council should be behind it, even though we have put all these savings into this current budget. We do need to be putting this forward so we can actually get into the 20th and the 2020 and 2020 and beyond. So that's what we should be doing.
Can I just ask a question of the councillors that have moved and seconded? This is out of existing digital transformation budget. Are you talking about?
No, this is a new budget.
Total new. So it's on top of what we've just passed.
Yes, there's not currently budget for any sort of AV technology to come into the council chamber. So the motion is that a new budget be established.
Okay, I understood that we were doing that through government.
There's a report coming which is going to have some investment, some digital requests for digital investment through the long-term plan, but that's still, even the report's due back, I understand, in the next couple of months. But the IM strategy that's being pulled together, there's no budget with that currently, and that's being looked at for the long-term plan. Perhaps Heather wants to.
I just want to make a point of clarification, and Stuart and I have just had a quick check. We think this would be a capital budget with a small amount of it being OPEX, but we would need to, certainly the subscription would be OPEX, but we think it's probably a capital budget at this stage. Just for point of clarification.
Okay, I'll go to others. Councillor Bowen and then Councillor Beattie.
I think it's been answered, but let's just clarify. This is not capable of being done within existing budgets. Any budget?
We don't presently have a budget for it. We could look at whether we could do it this financial year.
So you could, I know we don't have a budget for this, but I mean, in all of the budgets of all of the pots of money, could we find this money within existing budgets this year?
We can try. I mean, we've also, remember, got coming next week the voucher for 300,000. So yeah, we.
I don't know what the voucher for 300,000 is.
Budget, we probably could squeeze it in. I mean, I don't want to sort of be making bold statements on the hop without having kind of seen where we certainly are, and if the trends are going in terms of where we've been to date in losses each month, then it would be tight.
I mean, if I could add, I understand what Heather's saying. From a process point of view, to me, it's cleaner and clearer that this is considered as part of next year's budget. Heather is saying we could theoretically do this work under the Chief Executive's delegation in the current year. It's the same impact at the end of the day, effectively, because it's 80,000 of capital money, whether it's borrowed this month or next month.
But the point that Councillor Rutherford seemed to be making was that she wanted to get on and get this done quickly, which to me says within this financial year, not waiting for 1 July. So that would seem to suggest that it could be done within this year's budget.
Yeah, except we don't have staff just sitting around waiting for things to do. So we would need to make sure that indeed that it could be because we are either prioritising this over other things or where we are in terms of capacity. And I didn't have knowledge of this, so I can't give you a better answer than what I'm giving you at the moment. We could do our best, but as Stuart said, a relatively small capital budget.
Thank you. Okay, on that basis, I'll give notice that if this fails, I'll move a recommendation that the Chief Executive is instructed to pursue this within existing budgets in this financial year.
Councillor Beattie.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. If work is to be done on this, I mean, the proposal is that it's to be done urgently. So urgent means you're talking this month. So it has to be done in this budget. We haven't got into the next financial year. So if it's not going to be done in this year's budget, then there's no hurry. We may as well wait for the paper and everything else and put it up with anything else. I haven't, are we commenting or just questions?
No, we just, we're sort of questions and comments, I'm sorry.
Well, I'd like to make the comment that I'm a bit concerned that an $80K budget just to be approved on the hop without a paper. I have nothing in front of me to say, you know, you're talking about hardware, you're talking about a capital budget. And I mean, this is not proper process for this. This is something that hasn't even been discussed on any previous meeting, and to be just popped up and you don't even know what budgets it's in. And I just think, okay, if it's to be done urgently, I'm comfortable to have an urgent paper brought to council for it. But I'm not prepared to just pass 80K in this climate for remote access in these budgets. But if we've got budget for it, I'm comfortable to, but I'd like to have a paper, and I'd like to have feedback from CE that where is the money coming from, because another 80k is just another 0.1%, and well, we still got to, well, we don't know. We've been told we've got maintenance. I don't know anything about the maintenance costs. Excuse me, councillor, I am talking, so don't talk over top of me. But we don't, I have not seen any document in front of me to tell me where this money's coming from, what it's for, what we get out of it. And I'm assuming that we would get a paper from the IT department, not from Councillor Rutherford's personal whatever you call it, pursuing this. Well, you might have the digital portfolio, but I would expect a paper to come to council, not just an ad hoc comment with no substance behind it.
Councillor Naylor?
Yeah, I have similar concerns that to what Councillor Beatty's just expressed, really, in terms of process. This is our annual budget for 2021, and I had understood that legislation required us to, for any actions to come out of submissions. There may well be a submission on that point, and I mean, I acknowledge the need for this to progress, but I would be keen to understand from officers when that report's due to come back to us, and perhaps how something like this could be addressed through a paper that would provide us with the information that would inform us of what we would need to know in order to make an informed decision.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
It was not me.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that if this is a capital budget, that it won't be adding 0.1% to the rates. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, just wanted to thank Councillor Rutherford and Hopper for bringing this to us. The reality is things change big time around COVID, and the ability of people to actually engage with us as a decision-making body and their representatives in this city. And it's actually absolutely incumbent on us to actually move forward as rapidly as we can to ensure that people can engage, because actually look around the room right now, it's quite a lot different. There's quite a lot of people that are having to engage at distance, and there's thousands of people in the community that don't actually have a good chance to get in this building. They should be able to access digitally, and the sooner we actually do this, the better. I find it astonishing that on the back of what we've just experienced as a society, people are suddenly wanting to get hung up on process on something that sounds like it is largely capital and is not going to matter a jot in terms of the big picture financially. So let's just get on with it, please, and thank you.
Any other councillors wishing to comment on this? Councillor, could I just make a comment? Would you be prepared to get up? I mean, obviously I would take a late paper for next week's council meeting to understand what this is. It's new to me as well. I get your urge to do it, and I agree it needs to be done. I understood that was being done out of that bucket with governance, but it seems it isn't. So would you be prepared to change your motion to have a paper brought back under urgency, because that seems to be the push of the motion as well, next week?
Mr. Mayor, can I possibly suggest an alternative, which is this meeting adjourning today and then continuing tomorrow?
No, because we'll get through all the business today, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. I guess the whole point of this is that we are responsive and agile, and we see an opportunity and we act on it. So there isn't, the figures have come from the transformation team, who are probably the most agile and responsive unit out of all of the organisation in terms of them seeing a problem and responding to it. And so this is kind of the avenue that's come from. in my view, there isn't time to go out and get quotes and get all of this when we've got these figures. These have come from staff. I certainly don't know anything about the hardware. This is hardware that's used in councils all across America. And so it's being tested. There's not a council in New Zealand that's using this. It's already used around the world in local government. And so it's about us putting this in place so that we can, when we return, either in July or at the end of July, we should be sort of ready to go. And that was the point of putting in a new budget for the 2021 year, is that allows time for staff to, once they get the go-ahead essentially from council, that they can go and start putting measures in place so that we can get this up and running in July. July is only 5.5 weeks away, so I appreciate the comments that if we wanted this done with urgency, we should do it now. But even if we signed it off today as a budget for this financial year, it's still going to take, a few weeks to make it happen. And so that was the point of aligning the budgets with that. I'm not too sure what more a paper could provide. Is it the company name, or is it what?
Well, it's an understanding that you've just announced that it has never been trialled in New Zealand, which worries me a little bit. Don't get me wrong, I support the travel of the motion. It's just, as the Mayor, it's a surprise to me. The CEO was surprised to hear. I don't disagree with this, but it's just we're pushing it really hard. I'm quite happy to support it if there was an understanding exactly what it was.
So then I guess it would be up to the CE to advise whether she was in a position to provide that. I can't ask the transformation team to bring the report to council. That's outside
I would
of my
support
ability,
this if it had a little bit more rigour around it, that's all. At the moment, my personal opinion is I wouldn't be able to support this because it's just on the fly too much.
Sure.
But I would with a paper, but coming up with some urgency.
It would be up to the CE to determine whether his team could do that.
As this was news to me as well, I would like to take this offline and just check with my officers, and if we can bring a paper as a late item to next week that I'm happy with, and first and foremost, that the numbers were appropriate, then I'm happy to do that. But I can't give a definitive answer more than that right now.
Yeah, thank you.
Except that I would need to take it offline.
Okay, is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to give support to this. I think where we're getting lost is Councillor Rutherford speaking to it with the word urgency and getting up by July and whatnot. All this recommendation is doing is giving a financial provision for a capital expenditure for next year. And I think the determination whether it's urgent and ready by July is really questionable, because we want to make sure we've got a robust system and that it's has all the functionality that we're going to need without being excessive. And so therefore, I think this is really, I've got a high level of comfort to support the financial envelope for next year's budget. And I just really wanted to pull back from Councillor Rutherford's urgency. Let's get this up, because I've seen one product, for example, being perceived as being the response. I don't see it that way. I see plenty of space and time to work out what fits better for us going forward. This COVID situation has pushed us into the space of having online meetings and having access for the wider public, which we've shown a number of limitations in the way we've been doing it. And so hopefully moving down this track, we get a much better forum or mode so that we can all see each other. There'll be some cost savings potentially if consultants don't have to be flying around the country to come here to present for less than an hour, when we can do it, just doing it virtually. I can see a lot of sense around that. Also taking the limitations, if there is a member that's out of town on the meeting date, that they could actually still come in and contribute to the meeting effectively. I think there are a number of benefits that are very worthy of leading the way. We say we want to be a smart city. We say we're a young city. This is actually the mode of communication in many forums And in local body, we are lagging, and yet we champion technology. We, how young city and smart city, and this is all just hand in glove. We talk about backing our vision and goals, around sustainability and growth and ambition, and yet technology is still lagging, that we can't even do a basic investment after going through 8 weeks COVID and still working out, do we really need it? I think it is beneficial. 80,000 I'm very comfortable with. It's just a timing. I think councillors can at least put a capital envelope in to be explored. Thank you.
Question, yes, councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my apologies, Councillor Rutherford, I didn't mean to be personal about it. You have got that portfolio. One of the things I'd like to ask you is, you sounded as though suddenly we were going to have something in place urgently within a month, so are you just wanting a budget provision put in? Or are you anticipating that a product is going to be purchased?
Both. So I would like a budget line in there so there is the ability for this to happen in the next financial year. But I know the work that the transformation team have already done, and the hardware that they've already been exploring. And so I know that it is available very quickly. So it's not one or the other. It's that this can happen in the next financial year, but perhaps it could happen very early on in the next financial year.
So would you be happy if we did an amendment subject to a paper coming? That we give you the budget provision, but subject to, so for us that need, and to make sure the process is, would that be acceptable?
My personal view is that we give the budget envelope to staff and they determine the most appropriate way forward. We are not IT experts and we are not IM experts, and I would be really disappointed if it came down to us picking this program or over this program, which is why it's a budget, it's the goal identified, and then it's up to the staff who have got the knowledge and the expertise in this field to determine what company we go with. Yeah, I think it's very low risk at 80,000.
Thank you. That's answered my question.
Okay, can I just ask one question of the CFO? So if this was to succeed, this is going into, and it may need a year or something in it just to make sure we're locked in. That it goes into next year's annual budget. It's all capital, is it? And there's no effect on rates?
Yeah, I mean, this is, to be frank, caught me on the hop slightly because I haven't heard of it until just now. But my understanding is that the majority of that is capital, and there is a $5,000 licence fee, which will go on the rates. There will be some rates impact, but as it's capital new, it's the way we do it. Our financial strategy is half of the interest cost for half a year, and so the numbers are quite small and won't have a big impact on the bottom line.
All right, write a reply back to you, Councillor.
I guess I don't really need to cover this off again, but the only thing I would say is that we've had a discussion over several years around AV in the council chamber and live streaming, and we really, my experience has been that we've been looking for the perfect fit. We've been looking for one product that ticks every single box. And I guess through my conversations with the transformation team is actually about thinking differently and being responsive and actually saying, let's give things a go, knowing that we may be tweaking it, or we may purchase a product that does this and then we'll purchase the expansion of that later. But actually putting things in place, it's that whole think big but start small. This is just a small step towards providing a solution, and in the past, I think we've wanted to go straight for the big solution, the big glossy answer, but this is a piece of that. And so this is just about making small steps towards the direction that we're heading in. And it's very low risk. It's something that we can give it a go. It's no huge ongoing cost. So I would really appreciate your support in this. It's going to make a big difference for some people. Perhaps not for all of us, but even as we've seen today with Councillor Dingwall, she's still being able to fully participate because this is, we've enabled that. What we want to do is actually take this a step further and say when we're back in the council chamber, if we've got a member of our community who perhaps is homebound, but they would like to come in and make a public comment, this would enable them to do that. We've got consultants in Christchurch, instead of flying them up for a 15-minute presentation, perhaps they could call in. This would enable us to do that. So it's just about being forward thinking and trying something out. Again, very low risk.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, sorry to cut in at this late point, but I wonder if the wording is not appropriate to what we're talking about. Do we need to add in remote or something like that? Because the wording actually says to enable participation in the council chamber. I know we all know what we're talking about now because we've heard Councillor Rutherford speak, but as it reads...
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, I've given my right of reply, so we should be putting the motion. That's the motion that I've put up.
Yeah, I've already asked, Council, I've already asked the mover if she wanted to change it and she doesn't, so we'll let it go as it is. I do understand what you're trying to say as well, but it's Councillor Rutherford's motion, so yeah. All right. I might do this by division because I was going to beat Councillor Johnson to that.
I'm glad you're bending to my will before we even having to say anything. Okay. Councillor Bowen. 4. Councillor Butt.
4.
4. Councillor Dennison.
4.
4. Councillor Meehan. 4. Councillor Hancock.
4.
4. Councillor Barrett.
4.
4. Mayor Smith.
4.
4. Councillor Finlay. 4. Councillor Beatty. 4. Councillor Rutherford.
4.
4. Deputy Mayor Tukiri. 4. Councillor Dingwall.
4.
4. Councillor Harpeter.
4.
4. Councillor Petrinas. Against. Councillor Johnson. 4. 4. Councillor Naylor.
Against.
Against.
And the motion has passed 14 votes for and 2 against. Okay. All right, councillors, that is completed number 6, and we have no further business. So, look, thank you very much for your participation. And we, can I just ask Hannah what is happening this afternoon in terms of timing?
The plan is, originally the plan was that you would return home for the workshop at 1:30. We can hold the workshop here. So those of you that would like to pop in and have lunch and come back, that will still give you a very short lunch hour, but it will be less short than having to travel home.
Could we contact the externals and make it 2?
I know that there's one member on our panel that's only available until 2, so I'm hesitant to do that. It's not impossible though.
Okay, I'm getting the vibe
Maybe we can make it 1:45.
1:45?
Can we compromise?
Yeah, compromise. 1:45 back here. Cool. Thank you. either back here or electronically, but preferably back here. Makes it easier to start. Thank you, everybody.